Thank you for attending part 2 of our mini summer series, Roadmap to Innovation for Homocystinuria. I am Danae Barkey, an adult homocystinuria patient and the Executive Director of HCU Network America. I will be your host for today. We are excited to share our amazing lineup of speakers with you. This session will be divided into 2 sections this morning. The first section will cover various programs which help lead to clinical trials. And then the section after will include industry updates from current clinical trials, followed by a fireside chat with Q&A. So before we move into industry updates, there will be a opportunity to ask questions to our first 3 speakers. And then when we move into industry updates, there will be an opportunity to have questions asked then. So with that, I'd like to introduce our first speaker. Mary Cobb is the director at RareX and the contact for their data science governance and patient engagement teams. And she is helping develop the data collection portal for the homocystinuria community. Mary has been involved in the rare disease patient advocacy for over 10 years, including leadership positions at NORD and several other nonprofit boards.
Thank you, Danae. I'm really honored to be here. And thank you for the introduction and especially for the opportunity to talk to the HCU community about registries, about the important role of patient data powering progress in your disease, and also to talk about the upcoming collaboration between the HCU community and a data collection program that you will be able to join later this year. So we can quickly go through the agenda slide and skip next. Okay, so basically that's what I'm going to touch on today. I've been asked by Danae to, next slide, to talk about what is a registry. Really, my talk really kind of is in 2 parts, and I'm trying to give a brief intro to kind of set the stage for the presentations that will follow. The word registry is often discussed and really has been looked at more closely by patient advocacy organizations, really looking to provide data and collect data that will really help researchers understand their disease. And often there's been some confusion about the word, what that word means, but basically a registry is a data collection. And what we're talking about today is a data collection that collects information about individuals focused on a specific diagnosis. It can be done at a point in time, or it can also be done where patients and caregivers actually update their data on an ongoing basis so you can see their experience over time, with the disease. Moving on to the next slide, we have a nice graphic that shows that really data can come from multiple sources. Well, we're going to focus on patient-reported data today and the importance of patients being involved in data collections. It can come in from individuals who actually have a disease or condition. It can come in from their caregiver or from other loved ones. Also, it can be clinician-provided data. In addition, not only data from records that a clinician has, or maybe a clinician interacting with a patient, there are other sources of data like medical records, electronic health records, genetic reports, imaging studies, biosamples. So the key is really to collect data and maintain it in a data collection in a registry to help to fuel research. So the big question is why? And moving on to the next slide, why go through all this? Well, the bottom line is this kind of information that helps to characterize a disease is a very powerful tool, if done correctly, for helping to focus research and advancing the understanding of a disease. Researchers learning from the experience of patients and caregivers is really valuable, and it provides information that will help to look at drug development and clinical trial design, and really importantly, and I believe this will come up later in today's session, is about finding patients who are eligible for clinical trials. So the bottom line is your input really helping to create an understanding of the disease really will help to support research. So moving on to the next slide, what's the type of data that's collected? Honestly, researchers want to understand as much as possible about your experience, so they can understand the condition. So without going into all these bullets, it's everything from symptoms, the impact of whether it's diet, treatments, supplements, also how it impacts your quality of life, and also really importantly, what the diagnostic challenges were, especially if there's testing involved, and in the case of homocystinuria, where newborn screening is sometimes done, or really provide some insight into the experience of the patient. So moving on to the next slide. So we talk about, since registries and data collections are important, and patient advocacy groups have gotten very involved in trying to kind of like get these registries developed for the diseases that are involved in. Why aren't they always done? Well, they aren't always done because there are like significant challenges. There are costs involved. It's a major burden to patient groups from a time standpoint. Also, it's not like collecting a database of emails. Sound governance is required, and IRB is required, institutional review board oversight, transparent processes from the standpoint of consents, security, privacy. So it's a very comprehensive practice. Also, the type of survey and questions that are developed, is important that they're based on data standards that are that will be valuable to researchers to use. And so there are quite a bit of challenges, and that is some of the background that I wanted to provide you before I talk to you about RareX. So on the next slide, so what is RareX? This is one. Because of this background and because of the challenges in developing registries, a group of patient advocates got together a couple of years ago and said, what is the greatest need of the rare disease community and the patient advocacy groups that are really trying to help patients collect their data and make them available for researchers? So RareX was formed. We are a nonprofit. We're a group of patient advocates, scientists, researchers, patient engagement people who are really helping to help patient groups really collect their data to accelerate rare disease research, treatments, and cures. Our platform is focused on collecting data, connecting data, and even connecting to existing data. We're not taking the place of other studies, but we're really trying to connect data and also share it. And we don't, actually, it's patient-owned data. We don't sell or do research with it. We have a platform, and it is being developed in conjunction with technology from the Broad Institute at Harvard and MIT. So on the next slide, it kind of reviews what I already touched on, and we really kind of focus on what are we trying to solve for. We're trying to solve for the fact that the speed and productivity of innovation in rare disease is limited by lack of access to standardized structured patient data. And that's the focus of the RareX platform. So then if I go to the next slide, it's a great graphic kind of presentation of what I talked about before. Collecting data, patient data collection, it's patient reported data, sharing data and connecting data to other existing research, and then enabling data analysis through the Broad Institute's platform. It is what's called a federated database where researchers, all types of researchers, whether from academia, from the government, from industry, can access the data through the Terra platform, through the Broad Institute. So then we are so happy that we are working with, moving on to the next slide, we're working with the HCU Network America in making a data collection portal available for your community later in the year. And we're working very closely with the patient community to understand the disease and ensure that the type of questions that are being developed are done in a structured, standardized way, and we'll be able to collect data that will provide further insights into homocystinuria. So this is just a graphic representation of how you will access the database, where it will be set up for your community. You will be able to go in, log in, provide consents and data sharing. And the surveys will be set up in a way so that they are not burdensome, they're not that time consuming, you can go in and repeat them. So there'll be more to come. And as we actually work with Danae and the patient group to actually set up education for your community. And just one more slide kind of shows that you'll be able to access the database through a community page. This, of course, well, while she's a really cute girl, will be set up and branded for the homocystinuria community. So in summary, as I move to the next slide, it's great that the HCU Network America, the whole community really recognizes the value of giving you the opportunity to collect your data in a patient-reported way, add to it, and do it with less burden to you or to your family and to your loved ones, and to provide a platform that is patient-owned and will also provide access to the researchers. So my final message to you is, when this becomes available, it's really critical and important that you participate. So we look forward to you being involved and giving you this opportunity to do data collection. So thank you.
Thank you, Mary, for that brief overview here of RareX. We are so excited about this opportunity that will be coming later this fall. Next up, we will have a presentation from Sagar Vaidya and Jalay Gunnar of Trevere. Jalay is the Executive Director of Clinical Operations and is the not probably going to pronounce this correctly, but Pegtobatinase, which is also known as TBT58, the development program lead at Trevere Therapeutics. She has been with Trevere since 2019 and is responsible for overseeing the strategy and execution of the Pegtobatinase through its development life cycle. Dr. Sagar Vaidya is the physician scientist and rare disease drug developer who has served as the Vice President of Clinical Development at Trevere Therapeutics since 2019. He is responsible for overseeing clinical development for the company's metabolic pipeline. Thank you, Sagar and Jalay, for being here with us today.
Thank you very much, Danae. And I'd like to just start off by thanking HCU Network America for this amazing opportunity, bringing together these organizations and the patients together. We don't get to interact with people affected with HCU that often in this type of setting because of the nature of our job and the separation that has to occur for clinical trials to be effective. So I really cherish this opportunity. It's what we come to work for every day. Let's go to the next slide. And Danae, I think you've already given us the introductions here, so let's keep going. So I wanted to take a moment to just introduce our company, Trevere. It's a company that you may not have heard of before, and we are new to the homocystinuria space. Trevere is a biopharmaceutical company that specializes in rare diseases and developing therapies for rare diseases which have unmet medical need. You can see here, these are some of our values and the principles by which we live by. And a lot of companies, I think have similar types of values, but I would like to just say that I've never worked at a place where people are more driven to help patients with rare diseases. And I'm really proud to work there. I think many of our employees actually have been touched by a rare disease in their lives or one of their loved ones. Next slide. This is just a brief overview of what we do at the company. As you can see, we are focused exclusively on rare diseases. The first couple bars are for rare kidney diseases. And then we also have other programs for rare liver and metabolic diseases. And so we're really excited about the potential of the Pegtobatinase program in homocystinuria. Next slide. So I'm going to be telling you a little bit about natural history studies and why they're done, but I wanted to start off by just setting the landscape of drug development. And I know we're going to have a little bit more about this later on. Drug development is incredibly complicated and it takes a lot of time here, as you can see the bar on the left. But natural history studies come at the very early stage, and they are absolutely critical in rare diseases, especially to really set the foundation for all of the future work that occurs. And you can see here, natural history study is at the base of this pyramid. And as you go up into the lab-based research and the clinical trials leading to approval. Next slide. So let's get into a little bit more detail. What is a natural history study and why is it needed? Well, this first bullet point, rare disease is not often well studied and poorly understood, I think all of you are very familiar with. Because of the nature of rare diseases, doctors often haven't seen patients with many of these diseases, such as homocystinuria, or even if they have, it's not very clear what the treatment should be or what the complications might occur or when they might occur. And so a natural history study really increases our knowledge of this disease. And importantly, it provides a reference point from which we can now design and develop new types of treatments. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about this reference point. Next slide. So here's a great example, which is couldn't be more relevant. So these are some of the challenges associated with the progression of homocystinuria, which you are all familiar with. It can affect your vision, it can affect the bones, it can affect the brain and the blood vessels. So this is all really well known now, but how did we come to this information? Well, it's through a natural history study. So in 1985, Harvey Mudd et al. Published his first groundbreaking paper. And at that time, Dr. Mudd compiled data from over 600 patients all around the world to understand, what were the complications of homocystinuria and how might treatments affect it. And at the time, treatments with vitamins or with diet. And so he was able to describe all of these different conditions and really educate the medical community in terms of what to expect, how to go about this diagnosis, and specifically about the importance of vitamin B6 for some patients. Now, while this was an incredibly important study, we also have to know that it was limited to the past. So it was looking backwards retrospectively and also occurred a while ago. Okay, next slide. So Trevere is now doing a natural history study, which began in 2016, and it was started by Orphan Technologies. And this study, we want to understand really more about the disease and understand what I was mentioning before about the reference, a reference point, or what I like to think of it as, planting a flag essentially for the disease to understand if a treatment was developed, how would it affect that flag post? And so some of the things that we are looking at are studying homocysteine changes over time, looking at what are those complications over time and when do they occur? What are the current treatments that are being used and the impact of diet? And all of these things together will help us determine what is that reference point to really understand the disease and how we are able to assess it in the clinic, so that when we develop treatments such as Pegtobatinase, we will be able to know whether or not those treatments are effective or not. So we'll talk a little bit more about the natural history study. I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Chalet.
Chalet, we are not hearing you. Still can't hear you. No.
How about now?
Yes, now we hear you nice and clear. Thank you so
I
much.
apologize. Tech problems. I apologize. What I was trying to say, thank you, Sagar, for handing this over to me. As Sagar already previously mentioned, that we have the natural history study that has been open since 2016. And this slide just really goes over a few of the details of our ongoing study. We are currently recruiting for the study. Our protocol allows for approximately 100 patients to be enrolled. We are sprinkled across the United States, United Kingdom, and Ireland in approximately 8 clinical sites. I would like to state that we are looking into opening additional sites to be able to expand our natural history study so that other HCU patients can be able to participate. We've listed out some key eligibility criteria, and really what eligibility criteria means is what does it take for a patient to be able to enroll onto a study, and in this case, the natural history study. There's certainly more than 4 items, but for brevity of the slide, we really listed the highlighted points here, which is age. So for the natural history study, we're looking for patients between the ages of 5 and 65 years old. We do need a confirmed diagnosis of HCU. And as well as we need a commitment and a willingness to be able to continue with the testing and blood work every 6 months. And also provide diet diaries 3 days prior to your clinic visit. So I'd like to clarify that the diet diaries aren't required for the duration of the study, but really just 3 days prior to that clinic visit. As Sagar previously mentioned, that this is an observational study. That means that we are not providing treatment, but really looking into studying the course of the disease. So Pegtobatinase, as Danae has outlined, and Sagar, is not provided in this particular study. Next slide, please. So in conclusion, and I think you've heard this theme starting with Mary and now Sagar, is that patients play an incredibly important role in our drug development process. Without patients' participation, we're unable to advance the science. And really together in partnership with the pharmaceutical or biotech industry and patients together, that special partnership, we really hope to be able to deliver new options, treatment options for the patients that we serve. Thank you.
Sorry, was trying to get myself unmuted there. Whoops, I've lost all our attendees. I'm not sure what happened there. Can everyone hear me? Okay, thank you so much, everyone. There we go. Thank you, everyone. Sorry about that. I had a glitch in my own technology here. Thank you, Jale and Sagar, for that informative overview of the natural history study. We are excited to see the information that does come to light of that. Being that the last comprehensive one was 1985, that's 36 years ago. So I'm sure things have changed quite a bit since then. Next up, we have Kevin Thornlow, the global lead of early clinic development at Aglia. He has over 15 years of drug discovery, translational medicine, and clinical development experience in the pharmaceutical industry, spanning across numerous therapeutic areas, including cardiovascular, metabolic, neuropathy, urology, rheumatology, and rare disease. Prior to joining Aglia, he has held roles with increasing responsibility at GlaxoSmithKline, most recently delivering a 4,000 patient phase 4 study for, and I'm not good at pronouncing these names, belimumab. I'm sure that Kevin can fix my mispronunciation there. But thank you, Kevin, for taking your time this morning and talking to us about developing new medicines for patients.
Thank you, Danae. Thank you for the introduction and for the opportunity to provide an overview of developing new medicines for patients. And I want to thank you on behalf of Aglia for organizing this meeting. I think these kind of interactions are really important and very helpful as we think about delivering new medicines for homocystinuria. So if you can go to the first slide, please. So when we think about developing new medicines for patients, what are the goals that are involved? Number one, the top of the priority is to establish a medicine that's safe for patients. That's the number one thing that's in our mind as we progress down this road. Critical, of course, is to have an effective medicine that provides some benefit, substantial benefit to patients that meets their unmet need or unmet needs. And as we think about effective medicines and safe medicines, part of that process is determining the best doses for patients within an indication. And that may be different in different patient groups. So an example here on the slide is around adults or pediatric patients. They may very well get different doses, and that's something that needs to be determined as we progress through developing the medicine. Very important is the approval of the medicine by regulatory agencies such as the Food and Drug Administration in the United States. So all the data that's generated, information that's generated on a new medicine is something that comes together and is reviewed by the FDA for approval. So in terms of delivering that medicine to the market, to patients, that's really important. There needs to be an understanding and agreement on the benefits of new medicine across a number of different individuals. So physicians or healthcare providers, need to be involved in the process, as I'll talk about in a couple of minutes. But for them to agree and understand on the benefits that this new medicine is providing, and that's in order for it to be prescribed, to you as patients. Another important component of that also is for payers, such as insurance companies and healthcare plans, government healthcare plans such as Medicare, Medicaid, need to understand the medicine, understand the benefit, and be willing to provide that so that's accessible for the patients. And of course, as patients, for you to see that unmet need and agree on the benefit. So as I'll kind of come to at the end, it's important to have that overall fundamental agreement on the medicine, and the contributions come from numerous individuals in the process. So next slide, please, Danae. So overall, if you think about the larger process of developing new drugs, it can be split into two different sections. One being preclinical. So these are studies that are done that are not in humans. So non-human studies, and then as I'm sure many of you are aware, in the clinical phase of clinical trials. This overall process is a very long process and has a high rate of failure, which I'll speak to in a little bit. Next slide. So when we think about the preclinical research side, also known as drug discovery, there's a number of different components that I'll hit on here. So initially, when we think about developing a new medicine, we need to identify a target within the body that's going to alter the disease state. And that needs to be scientifically identified as something that will change the disease that exists. Next step is to identify a drug that will change that target. Most frequently, it's an increase in the target activity or a decrease, perhaps, as well. That's quite frequent. And once that's then identified, then that drug needs to be optimized. This is a very important step. And when I say optimized, it needs to make sure that the drug has the right strength. So in some cases, perhaps you don't want to completely inhibit something. You want to have the right level of inhibition in order to have the benefit. So that's something that needs to be established. We have to make sure the drug gets to the right location in the body. So if we think about a drug that's taken orally by mouth, it needs to get absorbed from the intestinal tract and into the body in order to be active. So that's an important component that we need to optimize and make sure it happens properly. And then once it does actually get to the location, it needs to be there for a reasonable period of time in order to deliver the benefits. So all of those components need to be optimized in a drug. Once that's in place, preclinical safety occurs, in which that drug, which is a drug candidate per se, then goes and is tested in animals, and that typically happens in 2 different species. And then once that looks good, that's when we're able to then move a drug into the clinical phase, which is on the next slide today. So as I'm sure a number of you are aware, there are different phases of clinical trials. Once that safety is established from a preclinical standpoint, that all that information then is reviewed and provides the opportunity to then go into the clinic to evaluate the drug clinically. And as we think about clinical trials, two key things, once again, showing that the drug is safe and effective in patients. And of course, since safety is number one, as I mentioned before, phase 1 studies, phase 1 of drug development is focused on showing safety. And this can be conducted in healthy volunteers in some situations, or perhaps on the disease and depending on the drug that's being developed. That then progresses to a phase 2 study, which is performed in patients and provides what we call a proof of concept that the drug works appropriately in patients. And along with that, an evaluation of different doses and looking for the appropriate doses to provide that efficacy. And then once that's established, that then progresses into phase 3 trials, which are the final trial, which is in terms of pivotal clinical trial. You may hear this sometimes, to demonstrate efficacy and once again, of course, provide further safety information. That's all reviewed in a drug application that goes to the regulatory authorities such as FDA or EMA in Europe. And then upon that review, a drug may be approved to be on the market and available for patients. As I mentioned, the probability of success in this whole process is amazingly low. And I think it just speaks to the difficulty and the complexities of this. You can see some numbers up here above. Any drug, this is a recent publication that has summarized the experience in the pharmaceutical industry. You can see that from that study, approximately 7% of drugs that would come into a phase 1 study will ultimately be successful as an approved new medicine on the market. And as you can see, as that progresses further through the clinical development process, the probability of delivering a new medicine goes up. It doubles when you go to phase 2, increases phase 3, and then even when you think about all that data in hand, you're submitting a drug application. It's not a guarantee that that's something that's going to be approved and marketed, as you can see. Next slide. So when we think about rare disease drug development, and we've heard a little bit about this in the prior couple of talks, there are some challenges with that, and very much around the rare part of the rare disease, and that it's a small patient population. And also frequently, on top of that, in a lot of rare indications, there's also a large variation between patients in terms of what they experience as clinical symptoms. So between the small number of patients and the variability, sometimes it makes it challenging to be able to have a really good understanding of the clinical phenotype, the clinical symptoms in the disease. And along with that comes a lack of what we would call validated ways or ways that are well established to be able to measure the disease. When we think about clinical trials, we want to measure the disease and then measure the disease later and show benefit with the new medicine. So it's very important to be able to have those tools or those capabilities to measure the disease. Also, frequently when we think about rare diseases, they're genetic disorders like homocystinuria is, and those trials may involve children, which can sometimes be challenging in placebo-controlled trials, etc. However, there are a number of things that are in place that help us with this. Particularly, there's a number of regulatory designations that are provided particularly by the FDA, that allows for close cooperation and discussion about what is needed in terms of information in order to support approval of a new medicine. There are cases where we can perform what we would call expedited trials, so going directly into patients and perhaps accomplishing the objectives of phase 1 and phase 2, as I spoke about, in one trial. So that helps speed things up a little bit. It helps us generate data and be a little bit more efficient with the process. And then as you've heard about, the use of natural history study data helps us in understanding the progression of disease and the clinical symptoms that the patients experience. And very excited to hear, the new registry that's being established by HCU Network America with RareX. And I think that's going to be very valuable as we move forward. And last but not least, the utmost importance here is the support of advocacy organizations such as HCU Network America and patients in this whole process on a number of different levels. So helping us understand the disease better, help increase the overall understanding of the disease, raising awareness of the disease, and engaging in various activities along the way in terms of this process, being involved in natural history studies, providing their information through registries such as RareX, and of course, being involved in clinical trials when that's possible. Next slide, Danae. So just to summarize here, delivering a new medicine to patients is a very large, costly, complex, and lengthy process, as I hope I gave you a little bit of sense of in the last couple of minutes. And it really requires extensive collaboration across a number of different experts. So you can see different areas needed for that whole process, from coming up with the concept and really understanding the science to prosecuting clinical trials. And it's not only within the scientific community or within a pharmaceutical company, but what's really required to deliver medicine is the community partnership. That includes physicians, regulators such as the FDA, payers, insurance companies and medical plans, and advocacy groups and patients all working together to do their part with that ultimate goal of delivering something new to enhance treatments. So with that, I'd like to turn it over back to you, to Danae, but thank you very much once again.
– Thank you so much for that overview here. Okay. And so I just have a few questions here. We didn't have too many from the audience, but if you do, please enter them now for our speakers that just spoke. But Mary, could you quickly just jump in and let patients know the targeted timeline for launching the RareX registry for the homocystinuria community?
Hi, Danae. I was trying to get back on.
Oh, we see you.
You see me? Okay. I don't see
Yep.
Yes. Well, we're targeting for the end of October, early November. So what we're looking at, we'll be working with Danae and the patient group in onboarding and education and preparing the community, especially and connecting to Awareness Month activities, so that the data collection is available by the end of the month. I always say November 1st, ready to go live. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. I know as an aging homocystinuria patient, I have a lot of things that I question. Is it homocystinuria just part of the natural progression of becoming an adult and aging? And so I'm very excited for the upcoming collaboration with RareX. And then there is a question in the chat here. What is the best way, this would be for Sagar or Jale, what is the best way to enroll in the Trevere natural history study if patients, caregivers are interested in this?
Thank you, Danae. That's an excellent question. There's actually two ways to be able to get additional information on our natural history study. One, we put in the link of our slide. There's a clinicaltrialsgov link. And I encourage all patients and caregivers to actually go to that website and take a look at a variety of clinical trials, not just Trevere's, but a whole bunch of other trials are listed on the clinicaltrials.gov. That's one way. Another way would be to contact Trevere directly through our medinfo@trevere.com Danae, I'm happy to provide that email to you so that you can be able to disseminate that to our audience today. And that's a way to get in contact directly with Trevere in a non-biased way, meaning you're not contacting me directly, and our medical affairs team will be able to give patients' inquiries answers.
And can I ask one more question? If there are patients who are interested, but they don't see a site that is close to them, are they still able to join?
Yes, I will speak for Trevere's studies only, so not representing other clinical research trials. At Trevere, we do have a travel stipend, and we do also have home health nursing that's able to travel to go to patients' either homes, other locations such as work or school, wherever that's convenient. So we do certainly want to work with the patients to be able to accommodate their location, but also their schedule as well.
Thank you so much. And then I have one question here for Kevin. And sorry, I'm trying to get to his slide here. And Kevin, is the drug development pipeline, is that different for like things like, common conditions, diseases like diabetes versus rare disease? Has the FDA changed how that looks, considering, rare disease, we don't typically have these large patient populations?
Yeah, so it's something that the FDA clearly takes into consideration. The fact that it's a smaller population when there's discussions around what type of clinical trials can be done and what sort of things can be measured. It doesn't mean that there's a reduction in the quality of the data behind the medicine. But that definitely is factored in terms of what can be accomplished given it's a small population. So it's very, as you're saying to today, it's very hard to recruit a large study with a very small disease indication like a rare disease. That's part of those those designations that I spoke about on this slide in terms of being able to have those conversations with FDA.
Thank you so much. There was one more question for the Trevere team. Is participation in Trevere's natural history study available to those in Canada?
Thanks, Danae. That's a good question. So currently we do not have sites located in Canada. However, I think those specific questions and details about how we can encourage participation in the natural history study, I strongly would suggest that we go through our medinfo at trevere.com. We do want to work with patients in terms of if they're not located near a clinical site, how we can best be able to accommodate that. There are some logistical constraints, though, about international travel. So again, I think perhaps we can go into a little bit more detail offline through the medinfo email.
Thank you so much. And I have included that link.
Thank you so much, Danae.
Into the chat box here. So if anyone has further questions on Trevere's natural history study, they can email them and they can further answer those. All right. So we are now going to transition into our industry updates. And I think all patients and caregivers are excited to be at this point. I mentioned in our first part one of our summer mini series this morning that the last FDA approved drug for homocystinuria was about 25 years ago. And so I know for us patients who have been around for a while, we are very excited to be seeing now not just one, but two different clinical trials for classical homocystinuria here. And so the first one we have is an update from the AGLIA team on their novel human enzyme for classical homocystinuria. And Eric Bradford will be doing the presentation here. Eric is the Chief Development Officer at AGLIA. Dr. Bradford has 20 years of drug development drug development related experience, including leadership roles in clinical development, medical affairs, product strategy, and commercialization. Prior to joining the team, he held numerous leadership roles at GlaxoSmithKline, most recently as the clinical development leader for, it's that tricky word again, mepolizumab, where he was responsible for overall delivery of clinical development programs spanning numerous disease states, ranging from rare disease to significant respiratory conditions. Thank you, Dr. Bradford, for joining us this morning and for your presentation here on AGLE 177.
Danae, thanks so much. Well, good morning, everybody. As Danae mentioned, I'm Eric Bradford, the Chief Development Officer at AGLIA. And I want to thank personally, as well as the broader AGLIA team, to the HCU network to have the opportunity to speak today, as well as to the participants online, to give you a brief update on AGLE 177, which is currently in phase 1 for the treatment of homocystinuria. Next slide. I mean, as this audience is well aware, the key focus in managing homocystinuria is to lower total homocysteine. Elevated plasma homocysteine has been associated with the increased risk of disease complications and progressions, while therapeutic benefit has been established when homocysteine has been lowered. One of the key challenges that everybody, I think, in this audience is particularly aware of, particularly caregivers and patients, is the challenges of effectively achieving control of total homocysteine, with many patients not able to achieve that with the current treatment regimens, which include some therapies as well as dietary management. To help address this gap, the team at AGLIA has specifically engineered an enzyme which can be administered subcutaneously with the goal of having a meaningful clinical impact on total homocysteine, with the end goal of having clinical benefits. Homocysteine, as highlighted on the side, exists in several forms, including homocysteine, the heterodimer form of homocysteine, or homocysteine, as well as the protein-bound form. The approach we have taken at AGLIA is to modify an existing native enzyme, in this case, cystathionine gamma lyase, which specifically metabolizes cystathionine, and have modified that enzyme such that it now specifically metabolizes homocysteine and homocysteine. Based on preclinical experience, which we have shared with this network before, we believe this approach has the potential to have a meaningful impact on homocysteine in the treatment of homocystinuria. Consequently, we have moved the program into clinical development. Next slide, Danae. One of the first steps in assessing the utility of a new product in humans is a phase 1 trial. Kevin and Sagar briefly highlighted on this. These are typically done and designed in healthy volunteers to explore safety and tolerability of a new entity. In the case of this trial, 100D, we are doing this in patients instead of healthy volunteers, as we believe it's important to not only establish the safety and tolerability of AGLE 177, but also the opportunity to demonstrate the impact on homocysteine in a patient population, and in this case, CVS homocystinuria. This slide is a schematic of the 100D of the current study in the humans. It's important to note that this trial is ongoing, and we previously communicated the dosing of our first patient in June of this year. The trial currently is being conducted in the United Kingdom and Australia, with an expected enrollment of 16 to 20 patients, and this ultimately depends on the number of cohorts that we explore in this study. The trial will test a number of doses, which are highlighted on the slide. The product will be dosed once weekly, and the trial will be for 4 weeks for each patient. And the goal is to assess not only the safety and tolerability, as I mentioned, but also the ability of AGLE 177 to lower homocysteine in a relevant patient population. In terms of who's participating in the study, The trial will include patients with a diagnosis of CBS homocystinuria. They will be required to have a homocysteine of greater than 80 micromolars and be of age 12 or greater. We believe the data from this trial will enable us to progress into later phase development, in which we anticipate running an additional larger global phase 3 study that will also include patients from the United States. We at Aglia are excited, really excited to work with the broader HCU community. And I think this talk today and our interactions today are an example of that, to really focus on bringing new therapies to help address this challenging disease. And we believe Aglia 177 hopefully will be able to demonstrate that in this study, as well as progress into later phase development with the ultimate goal of delivering it to patients. I want to thank you on behalf of the Aglia team for the opportunity to give this brief update on 177. And with that, I'd like to turn it back over to Danae and Sagar, who will provide an update on the Trevere program. Hope you have a great day, and thank you for the opportunity again.
Thank you, Dr. Bradford, for that update here on Aglia. If anyone has questions about the industry updates, there will be time in our after Sagar gets through his presentation for both Eric and Sagar. So please submit those either into the chat or the Q&A, and we'll be happy to address those questions after he's done presenting. All right, Sagar, you are up. Hold on, I'm going to spotlight and switch slides here.
Thank you. Yeah, and again, Danae, thank you so much for putting this together. I mean, with all of us 3 organizations and the technical challenges, I wanted to say you've done a phenomenal job. So let's get started here. Next slide. So just to start off, we want to be very clear that Pegtobatinase, or TBT-058, as we call this compound, it's not an approved medical therapy. It's currently being studied in a first-in-human phase 1/2 clinical trial, which we'll talk about. And the safety and efficacy of Pegtobatinase is still not known. So it's important to recognize that, and participating in clinical trials can involve some risk. But that being said, if patients don't participate in clinical trials, we won't be able to develop new medicines. So we always encourage participation when possible. Next slide. Now, this is a little bit of a complicated type of diagram, but I'm going to try to make it as simple and clear as possible. This diagram on the right side is a depiction of one of these metabolic pathways for digesting protein in the food that we eat. And generally, one of these amino acids, methionine, is metabolized down this pathway to homocysteine, and it goes to making the energy and the building blocks of our body. Now, in homocystinuria, the enzyme, which is called CBS, is deficient, as depicted here. And so you can see when this CBS is not functioning, it creates a bottleneck down this pathway. And so the homocysteine can't be converted to the cystathionine, and you get a buildup of toxic levels of homocysteine, which can be damaging to the body. This is where Pegtobatinase comes in. So Pegtobatinase has been designed to be very similar to the human CBS enzyme. It's a modified form of the human enzyme, and it's pegylated, which means that it allows it to last for longer in your body. And so Pegtobatinase is designed to be given by a subcutaneous injection and function in the bloodstream. Next slide. So Trevere and previously Orphan Technologies has studied Pegtobatinase quite extensively in animal studies. There are mice which have the same mutation in the CBS enzyme. And in those mice, we see that treatment with Pegtobatinase can reduce both the homocysteine levels throughout the body, but also can have some improvements in the eyes, skeleton, brain, and blood vessels. It's also been tested extensively for safety in multiple studies prior to moving to human studies. Next slide. So I'm really excited to share with you this information on our phase 1/2 trial with Pegtobatinase, and we're just actually announcing our branding of the name of the trial. It's called Compose, and it's based on the theme of classical for classical homocystinuria. And what we're hoping to do is compose a really informative trial that will tell us, whether or not Pegtobatinase is safe and effective, what is the right dose, and to take that forward into the pivotal trial. Now, this first bullet's a bit of a mouthful. What I'll tell you is this, our trial, similar to many trials and Aglia's trial, a phase 1/2 dose escalation study where we are going to be studying different doses of Pegtobatinase. Importantly, it's double-blinded, which means that neither the patient nor the doctor knows whether they're getting the treatment. It's placebo-controlled, so some of the patients will get placebo, and it's randomized, which means that nobody gets to choose who gets the treatment and who gets the placebo. And it's important to do these types of very rigorous studies so that at the end of the study, we can be absolutely clear that anything we see is actually due to the effect of the drug, and it's not biased by things that maybe the patient may feel or maybe the doctor may think about. And so we want to make sure that it's an objective study. And it's important to do that if we want to get this drug approved for patients. So what we'll be looking at, well, I think Kevin covered it quite nicely when he talked about the phase 1 and the phase 2. It's important first and foremost, always, safety, patient safety. We want to make sure that the drug is safe. And if there are side effects, we need to understand what those are and how to manage those. Next, we want to understand how does Pegtobatinase behave in the body and what are the doses that are required to reach the right levels. Then we want to look at homocysteine and what happens to those levels and how does this all work with the other medications and diet that patients are on. And finally, we want to look at, of course, how does Pegtobatinase affect the complications of homocystinuria. So with that, I'll turn it over to my colleague Jaleh to give you some additional information about this trial.
Thanks, Sagar. Next slide, Danae, please. Thank you. So as Sagar mentioned, we're really thrilled to be unraveling and our Compose study brand. This is the first time we've gone public with this. So hopefully we're going to be able to give a little bit of a home to formally calling it the very long study name of the phase 1/2 study. So now I'm going to be calling it the Compose study from this point forward. The Compose study, similar to our natural history study, is in several sites. Unlike the natural history study, currently, right now, Trevere has the Compose study in the US only. We have some cities that are currently listed on this site. And again, as I mentioned in the previous Q&A session, there's the Clinicaltrialsgov. Again, if there's any questions that you have about, can I participate? I don't live in this area. Danae did provide that medinfo at trevere.com. And I recommend that you visit either clinicaltrials.gov or email us directly to get additional information. Additionally, I'm really excited to be announcing a protocol amendment. When Sagar mentioned that Trevere acquired, formerly known as OT58, Orphan Technologies, Trevere really took a look at both of our protocols, our natural history study, in addition to the Compose study. And we took a keen eye in terms of patient-centric drug development. And we wanted to amend the protocols to make it less burdensome for the patient, more patient-friendly. And a lot of those details I'm unable to share today. However, if you are participating in the trial, your sites certainly are aware of that information, and I encourage you to proactively discuss that with your site. However, I am excited to be announcing publicly that we have shrunk the randomized double-blind period of the protocol. As Sagar mentioned, our patients do not know if they're getting active drug, Pegtobatinase, or placebo. And so for this protocol amendment that we're currently rolling out, we will now have a 12-week randomized double-blind treatment period. And then after that, we are going to have a long-term open label extension. And that's sort of a fancy way of just saying, after you've completed the 12 weeks of the double-blind period, patients will then be able to take active Pegtobatinase for the duration of the protocol moving forward. So that's something we're really excited about. And not only do we feel that it would be beneficial for the patients, but I think it will absolutely give us some information from the scientific end to be able to enhance our drug development as we move forward. Additionally, another piece of exciting information that Trevere is happy to announce is that we will be providing initial data from our COMPOSE study at the end of this year. I know that patients, as well as study physicians and study nurses, as well as the community here at HCU Network America, have been asking, what's the data? What does it look like? When am I going to find out? We have some patients that have been on trial for 2 years plus. So this is an exciting announcement for us to be able to provide today. Similarly to the natural history study, we do have key eligibility criteria, and it's much longer than the 4 bullet points here, but just to highlight, we do have an age requirement, which is 12 to 65 years. We must have confirmed diagnosis of HCU. And again, similarly to the natural history study, there must be a willingness to be able to participate and meet the study schedule, remain on a stable diet and supplements, and then again, the all-important diet diaries, which we know are very cumbersome, but that gives us really key critical information 3 days prior to leading up to that dose. Next slide, please. So as much as, I personally, Sagar, and the rest of the Pegtobatinase team would love to interact directly with our study patients, we are unable to. I think Mary covered it nicely in her presentation prior to us, is that there are HIPAA and privacy laws and ethical considerations that we must have that firewall between the sponsor, which is Trevere in this case, and our study patients. We must maintain the blind for that blind period, and we have to preserve the integrity of our study data. So we do not want any patient identification. We unfortunately can't have direct conversations with our study patients. However, to ensure that the study patients are receiving the most up-to-date and current information, we work extraordinarily close with our sites to be able to provide our site staff, the doctors and the nurses, as well as working very closely with Danae and the team here at HCU Network America by providing updates of where we're at in our drug development pipeline, in addition to details on the natural history study and our COMPOSE study. Moreover, Trevere actually does provide weekly newsletters to your clinical sites. They do include study updates, status reminders, upcoming events and activities. And so if there are any specific questions, if you are a patient on the COMPOSE study and you have specific questions, I highly encourage you to talk directly with your site. We've made it abundantly clear and provided all the information, and your site should be able to answer those questions. Additionally, as I mentioned, we are rolling out a protocol amendment. Oh, sorry, Danae. There we go. We're rolling out a protocol amendment, and the clinical team here at Trevere has conducted 2 very thorough, in-depth training sessions with all of the sites to ensure that they have a full comprehension of this protocol amendment and all of the changes. And last but certainly not least, our medical monitor, Dr. Griblikas, is in close, regular contact with our study physicians regarding any sort of safety and patient concern. Sagar nicely highlighted what is very key and crucial to our understanding is also not only the understanding of Pegtobatinase, but ensuring safety. So we do have those touch points with the sites. Next slide, please. In conclusion, as many of my former colleagues have already stated, we really want to thank the patients, the caregivers, families, friends that really contribute their time to participate in these clinical research trials. We know that it's not easy. We know that you guys have schedules and a life, basically. And these clinical trials require dedication and time. And Trevere and the clinical team here at Trevere really want to thank you for participating. And additionally, like my former colleagues have mentioned previously, we really want to thank HCU Network America. Danae and her team have been working in close partnership with our clinical team at Trevere, in addition to our patient advocacy team. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you so much. At this time, I'm going to invite our panelists to turn back on their camera, and I'm going to stop the share. And then we are going to move in to our panel, and Mark Lewis is going to moderate that. And so here we go. Up next, we have a panel on perspectives on clinical trials. Mark will also be taking the questions that were submitted. Mark, can you see the questions that were in the Q&A?
I think I can, Danae, but
okay.
Yeah.
I can also put those in here if you would like. But rejoining us from Trevere is Jale Gunnar and Sagar Vaidya. From Aglia, we have Eric Bradford and Kevin Thornlow. And also rejoining us is Mary Cobb from RareX. And then I'd like to officially introduce Mark Lewis and Lauren Reed. Mark is the Vice President of HCU Network America and the father of 3 adult children, 2 of whom have homocystinuria. Lauren is an adult PKU patient currently on the FDA-approved enzyme replacement therapy Palynziq. As an early adolescent, Lauren participated in a clinical trial for another drug. Lauren is an active member in the PKU community, and we're excited and thankful to have her participation in today's panel. And so just a little bit of background for those who are not familiar with PKU. PKU stands for phenylketonuria. PKU was the first condition on the newborn screening, and so we are very thankful for PKU to pave that way. Like homocystinuria, and PKU also follows, it's an amino acid based disorder and follows the same kind of low protein. In their case, it's instead of a low methionine diet, it's a low phenylalanine diet. And they too also prescribe to a metabolic formula as well, just instead of having the methionine removed, it has the phenylalanine removed. And so our communities have actually quite a bit in common there. So Lauren, thank you for being here today with us. And so Mark, I am going to leave it to you.
Thanks, Danae. Are you going to put the panel on or leave it as spotlight?
Oh, do I still have it as spotlight?
I'm not sure, maybe.
I think it's showing everyone.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, Danae, and thanks for the introduction, and specifically thank Danae for pulling all this together. This on behalf of the entire community, it's been a great webinar. It's been an amazing amount of information and content, and to the speakers and presenters themselves, very exciting topics. I have to say, before I get started, I'm really, during these discussions, I'm kind of pinching myself, right? Because it's to kind of make sure I'm not dreaming, because to really think or listen to these talented professionals and to hear about these innovative companies developing therapies that are really going to improve the lives of those with HCU is to me, it's a dream, right? Karen, my wife, and I involuntarily joined the HCU club 30 years ago when my oldest son, Benjamin, was diagnosed with HCU. And in those 30 years, most of them, very little development occurred. There was some early activities around what we call betaine, but really very, very little to talk about, very little advancements in the industry until about 5 years ago, when we started to see some of these new therapies emerging. And now here we are today in this session, listening to multiple companies and amazing drug development capability and personalities, telling us about all the work that they're doing and of the studies that they're running or plan to run or continue to expand on that trajectory of developing therapies for people like my son Ben, my daughter Gabby, who is also challenged with HCU, and of course the entire HCU community. So very exciting. Again, I'm still pinching myself. I have a bruise here, but it's really, really a treat to be able to sit here and listen to this wealth of information and to not only that, but to see the progress that's being made. So thank you. So as Danae mentioned, we're bringing everyone back as a panel. We have Lauren here to give us a patient perspective. And what we really wanted to do is speak more from the patient perspective, talk about these things that we just heard about clinical studies and how they run and when they run. And more importantly, for the HCU community, what can we expect, either being involved or hoping to get involved so we can help in this progression of these important therapies and hopefully get to the point where these are available to us as a community and certainly for those that are challenged with HCU. So with that said, I've created a few simple questions on that patient perspective. I'll target a few of you all in the panel, but of course others can jump in so that we get that overall perspective. But I'll start with Sagar and Jali. That natural history study that you've talked about, we've heard it before. It's interesting, and it's really great to hear you tell us the importance of that study. I think in your graphic, it was the sort of foundation to your drug development effort, and it gives you that insight into how patients interact or are challenged or seek therapy for HCU. And I guess I wanted to just really echo, I should say, what you shared with us is really the importance of enrollment in that study. Those patients aren't getting treatment, but the fact that they are getting oversight and they're engaging with your doctors, your patient, your physician investigators, really gives that important information. So I really want to give you a chance to sort of tell not only about the importance of the study, but then of those who do enroll. And Jali, you've told us how to recruit and enroll more of those subjects. What can they expect in a study like that? What is the typical day in the life, if you will, day in the week, day in the month of a patient in that natural history study? So Jali or Sagar, please share with us.
Sagar, do you want me to take that?
Why don't you go ahead and start, and then I can add some.
Absolutely. It's a great question, Mark. And I think my answer isn't just going to solely include the natural history study. I think that's the first question that any patient that's debating on entering any sort of clinical research trial, whether it's a registry that Mary nicely went over with RareX, a natural history study, an interventional study that we have at Trevere along with Aglia. The first and foremost is to really be able to understand what is expected of the patient and what is that time commitment. And I really encourage all patients to take a look at that informed consent, read it back and forth multiple times, go back to your friends and family and say, is this something that I think is going to be right for me? Or am I able to make those visits, those trips, if need to be, any sort of procedures such as blood work, scans, if needed, whatever the indication is. Patients will need support outside of themselves. So really looking towards friends and family to be able to help get them to the appointments, et cetera. In regards to answering the question specific to Trevere's natural history study, it's pretty much living the day in the life, which isn't necessarily easy for our HCU patient community. So really, as I highlighted before, the expectation is that currently on this protocol amendment, we have the patients come in every 6 months. And as you saw previously in the slides, I did highlight the importance of bringing that diet diary to the site. So at the site, you're going to, review your diet diary, review some medications that you've been taking, and also be able to discuss any sort of adverse events, maybe what we would consider side effects ranging from, headaches to anything else, having those discussions with the investigator and or the study nurse to be able to track the life cycle, if you will, of the disease and how the patient's quality of life is, because that's really key and most important to us. And that's where the natural history studies, irrespective of indication, really hone in on that real quality of life. And then in addition to providing some education on the disease. Sagar, would you like to provide anything else?
Yeah, no, that was a great description of the study. Mark, I just want to go back to what you were saying about understanding why a natural history study is required. So the thing that a lot of people don't really understand about rare diseases, although obviously you guys as patients understand, is that we just don't have that much information about these diseases. You know, when you look at diseases like heart disease or stroke or cancer, there are thousands and thousands of researchers out there producing huge amounts of publications. Now, when you look at homocystinuria, I mean, there are maybe a couple hundred over the past 50 years. And so really, we need to understand more about the disease so that we can, know how to develop the right treatments, know how to do the right tests in the trial, and also so that we can convince the medical community and all of the other stakeholders, including insurance companies, et cetera, which is critical so that patients can have access to the medicine. Because if we can't convince them that this is a serious disease, that there are many unmet needs, then we can't even get our first step off the ground. So every time a patient participates in the study, that is one step closer to getting a treatment approved.
Those are great answers. And before I move to my next question, I'll just I'll reiterate what you're telling us is that the importance of these natural history studies are really to tell that patient journey, that patient burden. And so that as you as a drug developer can really pull that package together, if you will, when you're engaging health authorities and eventually even payers, right? Those that are eventually going to have to put the monies up, if you will, to have to fund these drugs to those prescriptions and insurance companies and so forth. But it's really going to help to holistically tell that story is what I'm hearing. And the importance of our community, as small as it is to really support the, Trevere's efforts, other drug development companies' efforts into really telling that story, right? Because it's really part of that process, that development process to get these therapies, to the patients and to the market. Is that a fair summary?
Yeah, that's exactly well put, Mark. Thank you.
Awesome. All right, Kevin, I'm going to ask you a quick question. Not so quick. It's fairly open-ended, so careful how you answer it. But you gave us a pretty good overview of that drug development process. A pretty complex journey, isn't it? And lots of layers, lots of steps, stepwise, right? To make sure that how that drug is evaluated and how it eventually is rolled out. It's kind of hard to ask this, and probably equally hard for you to answer. But what can a patient expect over that sort of development journey? I mean, in other words, the study activity, the how often they may show up, the types of treatments they may or may not receive. I mean, in a broad stroke perspective, can you tell the folks listening here from the community how those studies evolve and what might be their expectations during those phases of the study?
Right. Yeah. No. Thank you. So I think there's a number of different points along the way, as you're saying, Mark, where patient input is very critical. So, in terms of, as we've talked about, in terms of understanding disease, so that that could be very early on in the process of that gambit of items that leads to a new medicine, to involvement in either registries, natural history studies, and then involvement in clinical trials with the new drug that's in development. So I guess there's many opportunities for patients to be able to engage in the process and contribute. And as we've talked about today, and just want to highlight it again, that input is so critical to provide information from the patient perspective. What their issues are that they experience personally, Throwing that in with the other patient information is really critical to understanding the disease. And, you know, Jalay mentioned, you know, understanding when you're coming into a clinical trial, understanding what's being asked in terms of visit schedules, you know, what's involved in the trial. You know, that's a very important point to make sure that you know, you're kind of aware of what's being asked of you, and can commit to that. So that's you know, I think that's very helpful to make sure up front there's a good awareness. Ask questions, I guess, in that dynamic.
That's great, thanks. And you mentioned in your studies where you're rolling out a smaller population. I imagine those patients have to go in quite regularly as you're understanding the reaction of your drug to their, you know, sort of biology, if you will. But maybe as drug development extends out to later stages, phase 2s and 3s and so forth, that maybe those treatment visits and rigor is probably less, right? Because they're maybe more evaluating the quote unquote real world of those drugs. So, so maybe over that development cycle, an HCU patient may see different levels of frequency and involvement depending on where you all are at on your progression of development. So you're nodding, so that seems like a fair statement.
Yeah, definitely. And you know, it all depends on what's involved in the clinical trial. You know, and as you're saying, Mark, frequently there may be more assessments done in the earlier trials as we gain that first experience in patients versus later trials. But it all depends on how the trial's designed. I think that's an important point. You know, they're all unique in their own way in terms of the objective of what they're trying to show. So it's important to look at them specifically.
Absolutely. And Sagar, hey, if I'm a patient out there in HCU and I'm on one of your current trial now, or I'm not, let's say I'm not, there's an opportunity for other patients to join later stages. It's not I have to stay involved with the sequence of clinical trial. It's you'll be pulling patients and enrolling patients in at each level of the clinical trial. Is that fair? So patients who may have missed the boat, if you will, in a current trial have the opportunity to participate as your drug development process continues, correct?
Yes, that's absolutely right. I mean, we hopefully will be enrolling patients for a while. And as long as patients meet the inclusion and exclusion criteria, for sure, they can still participate. Just to add on to what Kevin said, you know, when we start with these early trials, remember, we're learning, right? We're learning about this drug, we're learning about the safety, we're learning about the dose. And so those early trials can be a little bit more intense, definitely. And then once we get to the later stage trials, now we've kind of figured out, okay, well, we know we need these blood tests, we don't need those blood tests, we need these visits, we don't need those, et cetera. And so they can be much more streamlined, and they need to be done at a much larger scale. So they actually need to be simpler to be done.
Yeah, that's great. And if I'm a patient who's looked at one of your early trials and say, well, shoot, I don't have the time for that. As your trial advances into later stages, maybe that trial is less burdensome because you've advanced through some of that rigor. And it could be something that that person may find the trial design or the requirements of the trial more conducive to their schedule. So don't let the first trial perhaps persuade you from maybe understanding what advanced trials may look like, because it could be something that more fits where you are in life or your particular schedule. So I think it's important to always think of them sort of uniquely and individually, and for us as a community to make sure we're always evaluating what you guys are up to in terms of each of those trial designs. I want to talk to Lawrence. So real quick, Eric, I want to throw one at you. How do you establish enrollment criteria for these trials? How do you figure out who's needed when? And I'm guessing you're going to tell me that will vary based on the type of trial, where you are in development, and so forth. But can you elaborate?
Sure. Before I do that, I want to make one comment on the prior conversation. I think, in terms of how these two studies are conducted, the assessments, the burden, it is something that's always at the forefront of our minds. And it's always a balance between getting all the information you'd like to have versus getting the information you must have. And it's a balance to ensure that as sponsors, we design a study that's appropriate to achieve objectives, but also with heavy consideration of the burden of the study to the patients and the community, because it doesn't do us a service to design a study that is scientifically as rigorous as possible, collects everything we want to know, but then doesn't have a community that wants to engage in the study because it's not appropriately designed in terms of burden. So we spend a lot of effort, and I'm sure the colleagues around the table will do the same, around what are the key aspects we need to know about at these different stages, and how do we simplify these protocols and designs and such that we get what we need, but don't overburden the study to impact patient participation or even patients, time in the study. In terms of a little bit, you asked about our enrollment criteria and who can come into studies. There is a little bit of an evolution on that as you learn about drugs and you learn about your product. But clearly, I think when you think about enrollment criteria, you also think about who is the population at the end of the day that you want to have access to this medicine. And one of the objectives is trying to, balance the ultimate unmet need population to, okay, how do I run these studies and get the information I need to seek regulatory approval, but yet ensure as broad access in an appropriate fashion for the medicine for those patients with unmet needs. So there's always a continuum of that dialogue as you think about the study, think about the scientific question you're trying to address, and then with that end goal in mind around who is the ultimate patient population you're trying to serve. And there's a little bit of a, tension there as you go through the development process. But, you try to enable the right patients to be entered in the study who can ultimately benefit from the product. And that may evolve a little bit over time as you learn more about the drug. Clearly in the phase 1, it's a bit more restricted in terms of age populations or inclusion-exclusion criteria, because you're trying to understand the drug and you want to make sure the data you're collecting is really drug-related and not something else to help inform how you progress. Whereas as you go through development, you really want it to be more of a real-world type experience so you can understand what's this drug going to do when it gets into the market, if it does get into the market, and how will it behave from both an efficacy and safety perspective, because that's ultimately one of the key questions that the regulators are going to ask you as you move forward in your development. Have you studied the right patient population where they envision this drug being used, and what does it look like in terms of efficacy and safety? So that's that continuum, but with the goal of really trying to enroll the patient population that's underserved and best likely to receive benefit from the drug or therapy.
Great. So to summarize, I guess your point and the points made earlier, early stage studies may be, rigorous in terms of their enrollment. They may be rigorous in terms of their, frequency of visits and tests. But as you learn about the drug, that enrollment criteria may broaden, and the rigor of that study may loosen a bit, if you will, such that, again, if I'm a patient and I for whatever reason I was not able to enroll in a given study, come back as that drug develops or moves to later stages, because that enrollment criteria will likely change, and that particular patient may likely be more eligible for the subsequent trial, different from perhaps the initial trial. Is that a kind of a fair summary all around?
No, I think it is, and I think the comment you make around that part of that's our responsibility as sponsors and others in the community trying to run studies is to continue that avenue of dialogue to make sure patients and families who may want to participate don't feel like they've, quote, as you said, missed the boat, because there are stages of development with that we, without continued participation, we will struggle to bring these products to market. And so it's really an active dialogue all the way through up registration. And in some cases, there are some commitments that may bear fruit post-registration and even approval, where we need continued participation at a trial level to meet certain obligations that we may have as a condition for approval. So that dialogue doesn't really stop for a long time in terms of the drug development cycle.
Yeah, that's a great summary. And thank you all. I mean, what we realize as a small community is we have to, work closely with you all, the good work that you're doing. We're not diabetes where there's, hundreds and billions of patients, unfortunately, and lots of drugs being developed for diabetes. But in this case, we really as a community want to support the efforts that you do, because ultimately we want to benefit by the efforts that you are. So Danae's going to kick me under the table because I know we're running super late, but I want to talk to Lauren for a couple of minutes. Lauren, thank you for joining us. I don't see you on the panel, but I think you're back there somewhere. So as Danae teed it up, Lauren is actually a PKU patient, and with the fortunate opportunity to have her here today to talk about her experience in a trial that was run for PKU, and actually the product, the drug has actually been approved and is on the market. So Lauren, tell us a little bit about your experience in involvement in that study. How did you enroll, and then how was your interaction on the study as it evolved? Maybe you can give us kind of a summary of your journey there.
Sure. So the trial that I was a part of was for Kuvan, which is essentially a booster for our enzyme phenylalanine hydroxylase that we lack. Some of us have a little bit of production, so the idea of that drug was to boost the production of the enzyme to help us break down the phenylalanine. I was pretty young. I think I was about 11 or 12 when I was in the study. I did it down at OHSU in Oregon, and which was great because that's where Dr. Harding was actually working to develop the drug. So I was fortunate enough to be in the trial with one of the doctors who worked on the development. So we learned everything we needed to know and then some about it. So my mom was really comfortable with putting me in a trial at that young of an age. And at that point, it was in tablet form. So we would take the tablets, dissolve them in a liquid. My liquid of choice was Sprite because, I was 12 and wanted to drink soda all the time. And the way they did it was they said, okay, we'll weigh you at your first appointment. Here's how many tablets a day you need to take, a day for your weight. And we just kept track of what we were eating. We were asked to not change our diet, not change our formula intake. So we had a few control variables that we had to make sure stayed the same. So it was actually the drug making the changes and not us through dietary things. And we went through the trial. I wasn't really nervous about it because I knew there wouldn't be a trial if it wasn't to the point where they were safe testing out on people. And I was excited about it. I said, hey, even if it doesn't work for me, since I have extremely classic PKU and have basically zero enzyme function, that it would help somebody else. So I think that was a big trigger for me to want to do clinical trials, was to help other people, even if it didn't work for me. I did end up responding to Kuvan, which was great. My levels dropped significantly, but I was like 0.1% away from being able to continue into the next phase of the trial. So I got kicked out essentially for not having enough of a response, since at that point they were testing not just the response rate, but how it works with different levels of enzyme production naturally. So they were checking to see basically how they could get people's levels, and I didn't make the cut. But I did end up going back on Kuvan as an adult while I was in college. I was like, hey, I know this works. Now it's approved. I can try it again. And it was nice to have that. And I have a couple of friends who were in the Palynziq trial, and they shared the same thing. They're like, hey, if it doesn't work for me, it'll maybe help somebody else.
That's great. I mean, a big decision for both you, but of course your parent as an 11-year-old to really think about the scariness of a study and what's involved. And it sounds obviously like the company, the doctors and those involved were able to obviously give you the information, inform you to make that decision. How long were you on the trial when you were on the trial?
I think I was on the trial for about a year, if I remember correctly.
Okay. And lots of visits, lots of labs, testing and
Yes.
Of sorts, yeah.
We would do our initial big gamut of blood tests and then do our We would do like weekly blood spots, send them in, and then either every month or every couple of months, we would go in and do the full panel again.
Right. Well, that's neat. Anything else you want to share about the trial? I mean, obviously you were motivated, and I want to come back to that in a minute, but of the trial itself, if you wanted to share with those listening from the HCU world about entering a trial as a patient, is there something that you want to inform them to think about, or be wary about, or to be motivated about? What are your sort of passing thoughts on that?
I would say if you have the opportunity and you qualify for the trial, you should do it. You never know if it's going to work unless you try. And it may be that you don't qualify down the road and you aren't able to continue the trial, but at least you made it that far and you made that much of a difference for yourself and for other people.
Awesome. And to touch on that, because you mentioned it earlier, you must feel pretty good about being part of, as a patient, right? Being part of what ultimately became an approved drug and is really helping thousands of others. So that must make you feel good. And now you're one of those thousands others as well. But it must make you really feel good about being part of that process, albeit you, in a sense, donated your body to do it, but in a safe, controlled manner. You were able to actually progress what is helping thousands, and that really must make you feel pretty good. So you can certainly respond to that, but we appreciate it on the other side of HCU, because we're a few years behind you PKU folks, but we're really hoping to head in that direction. But anyway, yeah, you must feel good about that process.
I do. I enjoy helping people. That's why I'm so involved in the PKU community. And, as an extension of the rare disease community, I want to help HCU as much as possible, since, like you said, we are a few years ahead. Whatever, I think I can speak for the rest of the PKU community when I say whatever we can do to help you all as well, please let us know.
Yeah, us rare people have to stay, hang together, right? And support.
Yes.
That's great, Danae. If I missed any questions, Danae, in the chat, is there anything that we want to cover before we end this session? I admit I haven't been reading, so.
No, that was okay. There was just one question. I don't know if Jale or Sagar could speak to it. It says, if they understand correctly, the Compose is a 4-week trial. And what would that follow-up look like? Or should they email MedInfo to find out more details specifically? I'm not sure if you can even say.
I can comment on that. And I think perhaps, thank you so much for the question that was submitted. I think perhaps completely understandable. There might have been a little bit of confusion between the Trevere study and the Aglia study. So the Aglia study, I certainly want to allow my colleagues Kevin and Eric to opine on that. But the Compose trial, we do have a 12-week treatment period. And that's going to be rolled out in our protocol amendment. And after that is when the patients, once they've successfully completed that 12-week treatment period, they do have the opportunity to receive active drug, which is Pegtobatinase. So I think perhaps it was a little bit of an Aglia question, perhaps, because it was referenced the 4-week treatment.
Kevin or Eric, would one of you want to jump in on that, just to what does the follow-up look like for your trial, just since 4 weeks?
No, I think Joey hit the nail on the head in terms of that summary. I think that there are differences in the treatment durations within the study, and ours is a 4-week study at this time.
Oh. All right. Well,
so Danae, yeah, we're done with this session. I do want to just echo what Liz Carter wrote in the chat. Is I had chills too, Lauren. I mean, thank you so much for being here with us today, but for the work that you did, quote unquote work that you did to help the PKU community. So on behalf of myself, I really want to thank the panelists, your openness. Again, I'm still pinching myself, and I'm really excited to maybe sit on a panel someday or listen to maybe someone from the HCU community tell the story that Lauren's telling when we're on the other side of an approval and we have an amazing drug to treat our community. So take it away, Danae. Thank you for the opportunity to talk to you all, and thanks for your open, honest feedback with us.
Yeah, well, thank you again, the Trevere team, the GLIA team, Mary and Lauren for your time today, and Mark too. I know everyone is incredibly busy, and also for those who are in attendance, we really appreciate it. Really, what we want people to take away today is that there are so many ways for you, for us as a community, to be able to be involved in research and development. Not everyone will qualify for the Trevere or GLIA studies, but that does not mean that you aren't part of this journey as well. The collaboration with RareX will be an opportunity really for anyone with not just classical homocystinuria, but eventually with the cobalamin disorders tied to homocystinuria and even the severe MTHFR, they'll be able to be part of that process too, and help catalog those things that will help continue to drive research and development. And, you know, we'll maybe find more things that haven't been characterized in the natural history study that we currently have. And with the, you know, the other option is the natural history study for classical homocystinuria. You know, there's not really as many criteria as the clinical trials, and so obviously there's still some, and there's still the site requirements, but there's so many opportunities now for our patient community that there weren't 5 years ago. And so, you know, we really have this wonderful opportunity right now to be helping advance research and development for homocystinuria. So this is really an amazing time to be a patient, and to, you know, being kind of for new families, you know, you're at a pivotal moment really in our time, where we're really going to start seeing treatments and therapies to change. So it's an exciting time, and we hope you guys continue to check back and to engage. And, you know, like Mark said, you know, in a few years here, we could have Lauren not replaced, but, you know, with a homocystinuria patient, which would be kind of a dream really for us. And so thank you everyone for helping kind of steer our community in this exciting direction, and we're excited to see what comes next. This webinar, since it did go long, I'll just let everyone know that if you missed a part of it, that it is being recorded. You'll be able to find it on our YouTube channel, and so check back by the end of the week. And if you do have questions for Trevere, GLIA, or RareX, or anyone really here, please feel free to reach out to me. info@hcunetworkamerica.org, and I can either connect you with the proper people or answer those questions myself. So thank you again for your time, and we hope to be able to share exciting new updates in the future with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.